How can we best live our lives? It's a question this guy called Aristotle thought we should be asking more often. And because Aristotle was so important and is still so important for the way we live our lives and the way we view the world, I think he deserves a new title. Now, Aristotle thought about this a lot and put his ideas into a theory that we now call virtue ethics, a theory of what's right from wrong and how do we know what to do and whether what we do, our actions, are the right ones. And he based a lot of his ideas on the work of a former pupil of Socrates, who was called Plato, and I'll cover him more in other videos. And the ancient Greeks, including Plato and Aristotle, were both very involved with these ideas called virtues, and Plato had several called cardinal virtues, the first being courage, another being temperance, the third being justice, and the fourth and final one being prudence. And he thought that good people, the people that we hold up on a pedestal and go, yes, I like being around this person, I want to be more like this person, they had a high quality of these four different qualities, these four virtues, which he called the cardinal virtues. Now, Aristotle came in and said, actually, we have moral virtues, and these are also important. So as you can see, courage is on both lists. Then there's also temperance, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, magnanimity, proper ambition, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty, righteousness, and righteous indignation. And he believed that it was a bit more complicated to be a good person than just to follow Plato's four, and so he spread it into these. And as you can see, there is quite a big list of different ones here, and in the various virtue theories that have come after Aristotle, other people have proposed various forms and lists of virtues that good people, or people who want to be good people, should aspire to have. Now, as well as having these moral virtues, he also added some intellectual virtues, and the three main ones there are intelligence, science, and theoretical wisdom. And he thought that as well as having certain virtues of character, so the moral virtues, what sort of how people act and how they decide to act, they should also have a certain level of intelligence. Obviously, you can be a really nice person, but if you're really thick, then you're not exactly what many people would call a good person or someone they would aspire to be. For Aristotle, you then also needed these intellectual virtues. So what did this look like in practice, and how does this help you to decide what to do, what is right and wrong? Well, in this theory, there are no real right and wrong things to do. Rather than that, it's what's called an agent-centered theory, or teleological. Now, this word teleological comes from the Greek telos, and telos means purpose. And the reason why it's called the teleological theory is because, unlike other theories, so for example, in the Bible, you have a lot of deontological ethical systems. So, for instance, very famously, do not kill. That is a command. You are not allowed to kill. So that is deontological. It is your duty, which is where deon comes from, duty in Greek, not to kill. However, teleological is all about the purpose. It's related to, but different to, consequentialism, which looks at the consequences of one's actions. However, the difference with virtue theory from a consequentialist theory is that virtue theory is about being rather than doing. And for virtue ethicists, they believe that the important thing is to make yourself someone who is a virtuous person, and then you will know what to do in the future. And Aristotle, a very famous quote from him is, "You are what you repeatedly do." And so obviously if you mess up once with this kind of idea in mind, then it's not really a big issue because it's what you repeatedly do. You might once as a child have stolen a chocolate bar, but that doesn't make you a thief for life. However, if you keep stealing as you grow older, then yes, you are a thief because that's what you repeatedly do. However, if you enjoy spending your time reading books and learning about things, then you become what you repeatedly do, and you will be known as learned because you have learned and continue to learn things. And so to be a good person, just keep doing good things and you will be a good person. You are what you repeatedly do. I can't actually remember why I made this, so here's a picture of some nice Macedonian. So how does this help you to make the right decision in difficult times? Well, if you hone your virtues every day, when the time comes, you will know what to do. By being a virtuous person who practices being good, by using the morals and the virtues, the moral and intellectual virtues, when you come into a situation, then if you have tried to be a good person and you keep doing what you repeatedly do, then you will know what to do at this point. And the reward at the end of it all is eudaimonia, which is a term that loosely translates to human flourishing or eternal happiness. And this is the kind of feeling you get that after you've had a killer day and you've done really well, you've done everything on your to-do list, you've absolutely nailed it, and you lie in bed just smiling thinking, yes, I've absolutely smashed it. That's, I think, the closest we can kind of get to this idea of eudaimonia. Now, this doesn't mean with the virtues that you can kind of go off and annoy people with it, because it's easy to think that, oh, if there's courage, you should never have any fear. You should just, walk up to those hoplites over there and say, and pick a fight with them. And let's look at, science and technology. Oh, that means we should test atom bombs because it's all good for science. Well, he does have a few cautionary remarks about these virtues, and that is that the opposite of a virtue is a vice, and the vice should be avoided. And there are actually two types of vice. Now, if we don't see it as in that it is like a box and you tick the box when you have the virtue, rather there is a spectrum of virtue and vice, like in actions, for example. And the thing with virtues is that if you have too little of a virtue, you have a vice of deficiency, so you don't have enough. But at the other end of this virtue, which I was just describing, you have the vice of excess, which is when you have too much of a virtue. And like the saying goes, you can have it's actually the opposite of the saying, but it's that you can have too much of a good thing. And this is something that Aristotle talks about as well. So, for example, for the virtue of courage, if the Gauls are attacking your village, and yes, these are fitted to ancient Greek life, then you have several options. Now, the vice of deficiency would be simply to run away and hide. You aren't showing any courage in this situation, so you have a lack of courage. But at the same time, if there's the whole Gaulish marauding party and you try and stop them only yourself with a buttering knife, then you've got way too much courage. You just want to tone it down slightly. Whereas in fact, maybe the best thing to do, and this is something that Aristotle says, is courage and having courage, the virtue of courage, is really not when you step in yourself, but when you know when to go for help for a higher authority. So perhaps the best thing to do in that situation would be to go and get the local militia to fight off the Gauls. So remember that next time Vercingetorix comes and tries to take away your treasure. Now, this theory might sound a bit familiar, and that's because a lot of the Catholic Church uses things like this as well, thanks to St. Thomas Aquinas, who I think during the 13th century was reading a lot of Aristotle's stuff. The ancient Greeks were very widely read in the early Middle Ages, leading to the scholastic movement, which is where they tried to marry the kind of ancient Greek thought, but of course the ancient Greeks weren't Christian, which was an issue, so they then tried to mix that with Christian schools of thought, St. Thomas Aquinas being one of the most successful and a very interesting character in and of himself. And he used this to inform his own theory of how to choose right from wrong, which has been the theory that the Catholic Church has used for, and still does use for a large part, which is known as natural moral law. Now, it's also been used by another guy more recently in the 80s who wrote a book about this called Alistair MacIntyre, and he wrote a book called After Virtue in 1981, which also looked at virtue theory but tried to make it a bit more modern, because obviously Aristotle had been writing in, I believe, the 4th or 5th centuries BC, so it's quite a while ago, and society has unarguably changed quite a bit. But his approach to this, and something that I think we can all learn from, is to ask 3 questions. The first being, who am I? The second being, who ought I to be? And the third being, how do I get there? And I think those questions are quite useful for anyone trying to improve their life and to trying to understand what the right action is to take. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Now, of course, there are different things which have different purposes. Again, going back to the teleological side of this, things having a purpose. So the purpose of a knife is to be sharp. So it should also be fitted how you act to what your purpose is, not only as a person, but in society and in different situations. So a sharp knife that cuts through things is a good knife because it fulfills its role. At the same time, a pair of slippers, if they are comfy and they fit on your feet and you don't end up slipping and falling in the kitchen, are a good pair of slippers. And of course, a person who is a virtuous person who has all of these different virtues outlined by Plato and then by Aristotle, then they are a good person, a virtuous person, and something we should aspire to be ourselves. Alright everyone, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video about virtue ethics, a little bit about the ethics of the ancient Greeks, specifically a little bit of Plato in the start, and then mostly Aristotle, who was the guy who really proposed this theory. So I thought this was an interesting topic to do. I haven't seen too many other videos about this, so I hope this piece of ancient Greek philosophy hasn't been too boring, and that you've enjoyed this video. So do check out some of my other videos if you're new, some of my other philosophy, and a bit of This Was Ethics, a bit of those videos, and I will see you again very soon. Thanks for watching. I've been Hilbert, and this has been, well, kind of the ethics, or the history if you like. Thanks for watching.